Chapter 3. Awful Cocktails. After tasting Cruz's awful recipe for Molly's 2, Emerson sat back down with her hot chocolate in hand. It had been a relatively slow morning in the firehouse, so they all tried to occupy themselves with different things. For Emerson, that was trying to understand what it was that Mouch liked so much about a specific 9 a.m. program on TV. She spent almost all morning trying to figure it out, until she was quite literally saved by the bell. Truck 81, Squad 3, Ambulance 61. Single vehicle accident. Passenger trapped. They all went rushing past the door and into their rigs, driving away in almost perfect sync to get to the scene. The car accident was a little worse than they first thought it would be. Emerson stood aside with Gabby, waiting for the firefighters to give them the all clear to go help the trapped woman. As soon as the signal was given, Emerson jumped down the hole the car was trapped in and crawled closer to the woman. "Hi, Allison, right? I'm Emerson." She heard the firefighters working on the car to take off the bottom of it so they could get the woman out. When it started making more noise, the woman panicked. Hey, I know it's loud. That sound is normal, I swear." "No, I smell gas." The woman let her know, and Emerson took a look around, noticing exactly where the leak was coming from. She slid herself out from under the car and hurried to make eye contact with the two lieutenants. "Casey? Severide?" "Yeah, we know." Casey quickly called back. Keep going. Keep going." Emerson stayed still as she waited for them to be done. As soon as the back of the car was practically taken off, Gabby slid into the back of it with a backboard and a collar. She put them on the woman and carefully slid her out towards Emerson. The paramedics quickly pulled her out and brought her to the ambulance. The ride to the hospital went by fast, and the drop-off seemed even faster. They were practically in and out, so they were able to head back to the firehouse. Although the two decided to make a stop at Gabby's favorite donut shop, which she informed her that was the one Shay loved too. Emerson was glad she shared it with her too. It meant a lot. How I missed eating pastries and donuts. I swear, the best are in Chicago," Emerson said, biting into the donut with her eyes screwed shut as she enjoyed it. "You missed?" Gabby chuckled. "Did you ever stop eating them?" "Oh, yeah. Back in St. Louis, I was trying to get back in shape while planning the wedding." Emerson was just about to elaborate when she realized what she said. The words came out of her mouth before she could even think about it. She found herself wishing she turned her tongue 7 times in her mouth before speaking up. Luckily for her, just as Gabby was about to question her about it, their radios went off. Ambulance 61, 2-vehicle accident, corner of Jackson and Rose. They immediately shook off the previous conversation, which Emerson wished would never come up again, as they rushed to the rig. The newest 61 paramedic took the wheel and drove them to the location. She parked the ambulance in a way that would block off incoming traffic before they stepped out and approached the scene. "Thank God you're here." A woman standing practically in the middle of the street called for them, waving them over. "Over here." Gabby went over to check on the woman while Emerson stopped in front of the man she supposed was the driver of the other car. "Were you hurt, sir?" she asked, putting on her gloves. Nah, it's all good." He shook his head, avoiding looking at her while he kept his hands buried deep in his pockets. "Look, the only injury he has is the brain cells he killed with whatever he drank." The woman objected, taking over a conversation that wasn't hers to begin with. "No way, dude. Totally sober." The man slurred, causing Emerson to roll her eyes as he stepped towards Dawson and the woman. "I told the lady, let's just exchange information. But I know the police don't come to a minor accident unless you report an injury," the woman answered as the man took a slight step back. "That's right, the police are on their way now." The man walked away while they tended to the woman's bump on the head. As she turned back towards him, she noticed the man had collapsed in the street. "Dawson!" Emerson exclaimed, rushing towards him. Gabby went straight to check the head, while Emerson reached for the packet she noticed he was holding. She rolled her eyes as she grabbed it from him, holding it up for Dawson. "That's crack." The man quickly started convulsing as they were checking his pupils. They professionally tended to him, trying to keep the woman from stepping too close to them since they were administering drugs and such. Eventually, the man came to, throwing up all over the overbearing woman and Emerson. As soon as they arrived back at the firehouse, Emerson cleaned herself up as well as the ambulance itself. Cruz and Otis quickly came out to tease her, but she tried to ignore them, as well as ignore the smell igniting from her own clothes. She also treated herself to a shower, more than ready to head home after shift and just forget all about getting thrown up on. Luckily for her, she had a Pilates class after shift, which gave her the opportunity to blow off some steam and keep her mind off of it all. The next shift arrived quickly, which Emerson was more than happy about because she was growing tired of unpacking, especially when it didn't seem like she was actually getting anything done. The paramedic was in the middle of a disagreement with the men because they were claiming that she had to cook since she was the newest recruit in the firehouse. Emerson didn't mind cooking per se, but being told to do it by a bunch of men who would then proceed to keep picking on her the whole time, it didn't sound too appealing to her. Plus, she was speaking from experience since that's exactly what happened the first time she cooked. So she tried to pass on the task onto someone else. Engine 51, Truck 81, Squad 3, Ambulance 61, House Fire 871 Carver Drive. Emerson sighed in relief, hurrying out of the kitchen and into the ambulance. The firefighters went straight to work, while Emerson and Gabby waited with their stretcher ready to roll if anyone needed immediate transport. "How are the fire classes going?" Emerson asked, leaning against the stretcher to extend her back a little. "Pretty good. I'm almost done, actually," Gabby announced, and Emerson had to admit she was quite sad to lose her first partner at 61, but at the same time she was happy for her. She knew it was a project Leslie Shea encouraged her to pursue. Soon after, the victim was pulled out of the building, and as they transported him to Med, they heard Severide calling for the cops over the radio. It made the hairs on her arms raise as goosebumps appeared all over her skin, wondering what Severide could have possibly found in that house. After hearing so much about Molly's, Emerson decided to finally check it out, see if it lived up to the expectations. She didn't dress up per se, but she did clean up after shift to make sure she didn't seem as tired as she really was. The minute she walked in, the woman glanced around the room to take it all in. She had to admit that the bar was very well decorated, and it did feel like some kind of safe haven, like Herman described it. The lights hung on the ceiling lit up the room just enough to make the wood-paneled wall seem not so dark. She could easily make out everyone's faces without having to squint her eyes in order to look around. Her eyes scanned the people sitting at the bar, stopping across a very familiar brunette. His back was facing her as he sipped on a beer on his own. She walked up to him, mentally trying to convince herself that it was all right to do so since they crossed paths before and they had a mutual friend. "Hey," Emerson spoke up as she grew the courage to take a seat on the stool next to him. He slowly turned towards the woman, his lips curving up as he smiled at her. "The detective, right?" Jay chuckled at the paramedic's words, nodding his head. "Also known as Jay Halstead." The detective offered his hand, which she gladly shook with a smile on her face. "You're Weller, right? Also known as Emerson Weller." "Yeah," she used his own words, turning to Herman, who had walked up to her. "Hey, Herman, Weller!" he exclaimed happily, grabbing a glass and making up a cocktail for her. "So, what do you think?" the firefighter questioned, sliding the glass over to her as he gestured to the bar around them. Emerson grabbed the glass and brought it up to her lips, taking a sip as she pretended to look around. As the liquid came into contact with her taste buds, she had to restrain herself from spitting out the drink. It was awful. "Well, it's a great bar, Herman," she assured him, raising her glass to the man as he shot her a thumbs up and walked away. Emerson grimaced, slightly pushing the drink away. A chuckle coming from Jay's lips grabbed her attention. The paramedic turned towards him with a questioning look on her face. He wiped his lips clean from the beer he just drank, watching her with a raised eyebrow. "No one warned you about Herman's god-awful cocktails, She gasped, her jaw loosening as her eyes widened. "No," she exclaimed, her voice deeper in disbelief. Jay only laughed in response, nodding. "Well, thanks for telling me." He could tell she was joking, even if her tone was sarcastic, so he simply nodded back with a smirk on his lips. I find that mistakes are better learned when tested out. Her bottom lip jutted out as she tilted her head. Duly noted. Thanks for the lesson, detective. He raised his bottle at her, still smirking as he brought it up to his lips. So no case to work on tonight? Actually, he paused, licking his lips. We do. I just got the night off because I'm heading to New York first thing tomorrow. Jay admitted, it's actually related to the fire you responded to earlier. Oh. Her eyes widened, recalling Severide asking for police assistance on scene. Severide found something, right? Yeah. Unlocked a case related to the Special Victims Unit in New York, so Aaron and I are headed there to work it. Jay answered honestly. She's linked to one of the victims, which is why we're heading there. Emerson nodded, feeling slightly bad for not reaching out to Aaron as soon as she stepped foot in Chicago. She'd been too busy adjusting to her new life that she'd forgotten to ask her longtime friend how she was doing. Emerson was well aware of Aaron's rocky past, and as soon as Jay mentioned the SVU in New York, she connected the dots. When they were teenagers, Aaron's brother, Teddy, ran away and was suspected to have gone to New York, so it had to be about him. Aaron was left alone with Bunny, who soon after abandoned her, causing her to end up living with Hank Voigt, who turned out to be the one person who actually looked out for her. But she always felt bad about the fate Teddy was given. Is Aaron your partner? She curiously asked, knowing that they were usually working paired up in the intelligence unit, at least from what Aaron had told her. The brunette also said she was teamed up with a tall, handsome brunette, so it was only fair to assume it was Jay. Yeah, he answered, and suddenly something seemed to be clicking in his head. And you're her friend who came back from St. Louis, right? She smiled. Guilty. They chuckled, the sudden realization suddenly making them feel even more at ease with each other. If they had a mutual friend, it meant they could trust each other, right? Emerson sat up straight, but kept her body turned towards the detective. So she does talk about me, First Severide and now Jay. She could only wish Aaron was saying good things about her. She does, Jay chuckled. Only good things, I swear. He raised his hands up in fake defense. She pointed a finger at him jokingly. I hope so, because if she ever says that I corrupted her, I didn't. It's the other way around. He laughed. I believe you on that. Jay stood up, finishing his beer in one quick sip. It was great formally meeting you, Weller. I should probably get some sleep before we head off, though. Emerson nodded, shooting him a smile. Good idea. I'll see you around, Halstead. As she watched him walk off, she thought to herself that she really should reach out to Aaron, make sure she was okay. Although with a partner like him, she figured she was well surrounded. Chapter 4. Goody Two-Shoes. After a long shift at the firehouse, most of them planned on regrouping over at Molly's for beers. Emerson was tempted to just skip and head back home to slump down on her couch, but her new partner, Peter Mills, refused to let her do so. He'd been her partner for the past week or so, since Gabby passed all of her classes, making her an official firefighter on Truck 81. Emerson was sad to lose her, but she was also very happy for her. And so Emerson found herself walking inside Molly's with her head held high despite the dark circles under her eyes. She eyed the room, noticing all the familiar faces in the bar. Before she could go talk to anyone, she made sure to go get herself a drink, mostly because she didn't want Herman to serve her another homemade cocktail. With a large glass of beer in hand, she walked towards a particular table. Her free hand reached to tap on the shorter woman's shoulder, patiently waiting for her to turn around. As soon as she did, Emerson smiled widely. Hi, Aaron. Aaron stood up right as the words came out of her mouth, wrapping her arms around her old friend. Hi! Aaron widely smiled, moving her from side to side in the embrace without letting go. Jay told me he met you. Couldn't believe I hadn't seen you yet. I know, she spoke, a guilt-driven expression on her face. I'm so sorry I didn't call earlier. I've been a little overwhelmed with everything going on. Aaron waved her off. Don't even worry about it. I know how it is. They chuckled before Aaron stood to the side, gesturing to the table beside them. Come sit with us. Even though she had been invited by her own work friends, she figured the least she could do was catch up with her old friend. Emerson noticed Jay was sitting at the table along with other people she figured were from the 21st District. She greeted Jay first with a smile and a wave before she introduced herself to Kim and Kevin. She was informed that Kim wasn't a part of the intelligent unit, but she was planning to be. Emerson found her ambition admirable, especially after she learned that Kevin used to be her partner before he was promoted before her. As Kim and Kevin got into a long conversation about the days they used to patrol together, Emerson turned to Aaron. "So how have you been?" From the tone she used, Aaron knew right away that Emerson was referring to the trip to New York she and Jay just came back from. Her partner told her he'd briefly spoken about it with Emerson when he crossed paths with her at Molly's. "Doing okay. Teddy's better now that the whole operation's been shut down, but it's been a hard couple of days," Aaron answered, quickly glancing at Jay before turning back to Emerson, who sat at the end of the table. "Is he back in Chicago?" she questioned, taking a sip of her beer. Yeah. Briefly, we're meeting with Bunny tomorrow morning and all. I think he's going to head off after that. Too many things happened here." Her eyebrows raised. "I can understand that. When you find a safe place, you run back to it and never turn back." Emerson chuckled, and her statement raised a flag in Jay and Aaron's minds. They wondered if she meant that Chicago was her safe place, and if so, what happened in St. Louis that made her run back here? "And how are you dealing with all of it?" "I'm dealing with it," Aaron stated, looking at Jay. "I have good people around me." She smiled, sharing a lingering stare with Jay before turning back to her friend. Emerson smiled and nodded, right as Kim and Kevin snapped out of their conversation and joined back the groups. The shared looks between Aaron and Jay confused Emerson. As far as she was aware, Aaron wasn't seeing anyone, and especially not her partner. She knew for a fact that Voight would never allow it. He was way too protective of her. Plus, Voight was running the highest unit in Chicago, so there was no way he was willing to put it all on the line for a romance. But there was definitely something going on between them. Emerson was sure of it. For one, they seemed to have a great chemistry. For two, their eyes spoke louder than words. Anyway, Aaron cleared her throat. "How's Jonathan doing?" Her old friend's question made her freeze in place briefly. Of course Aaron would ask, because why wouldn't she? Last thing she knew, everything and everyone was fine. There was no reason for her to doubt anything. "All good," she ended up answering, shooting them what she meant to be a sincere smile. Aaron saw right through her, deciding that maybe she didn't want to say anything more in front of people she barely knew. She quickly changed the subject, catching up with her old friend for a majority of the night. Eventually, Emerson was dragged away by a very tipsy Peter Mills and Joe Cruz, who insisted she dance with them. A few firefighters joined along with people she had yet to meet from either Chicago Med or from the police department. The paramedic was having a lot of fun, a lot more than she's had in the past few weeks. It felt good to just be free and have fun without worrying about anything. Aaron and Jay sat at their table still, watching her with an amused smile on their faces. Jay was curious about the woman who apparently had known Aaron for most of her life. He didn't know much about her, but from the times they saw each other, he liked how quick on her feet she was, and he knew that she had to have a great personality if Aaron kept her around for so long, especially let her be around Voight. Jay knew that his sergeant knew Emerson because Aaron made a point of telling him she was back in town. It made Jay wonder what it was about the relationship between Aaron and Voight that made her refuse to be with him. He didn't know much about it, but Aaron and him were close enough to both know that there was something going on between them. It was a lot more than friendship at this point, but Jay was confused, and he didn't want to be in a relationship that had to stay hidden. His eyes swiftly moved from Aaron back to Emerson. He watched as her body moved to the music that played in the bar. Her head tilted back with laughter as one of the boys around her said something funny. Her smile was contagious, and she seemed really great to have around. "How long have you known her?" Jay suddenly asked, catching Aaron by surprise. "Since we were teenagers. She's always been a goody two-shoes, doing the right thing and all. It's a wonder she put up with me." Aaron laughed, shaking her head. "Em always followed me around, even when I was getting in trouble, so when Voight brought me in, he made sure she stuck around." Jay's lips curved up as he slightly nodded his head. Sounds like Voight. Yeah. She let out a breathy laugh. We kind of lost touch as we grew up, different paths and all, but whenever we get the opportunity to catch up, we do. Erin couldn't help but wonder if something was wrong with her. Erin had helped her move to St. Louis, and she remembered how happy she was to make that move. It was the beginning of a new chapter of her life, and she was more than ready for it. Now that she was back in Chicago, Erin felt like something was off. On the other side of the room, Emerson enjoyed her time with her new coworkers and friends. She let loose and made sure to enjoy her time off, as she barely got any of it in the past few weeks. It helped her forget everything she'd actually been running from and meet new people. What more could she ask for? After some time, she decided to go grab a drink at the bar. Most of them stopped dancing and went back to their tables to either continue hanging out and drinking or to say goodbye to their friends. Cruz bought her one last drink before heading off, telling her to be safe. Emerson smiled at him as he walked away, taken by surprise by Erin walking up to her. "Hey, sorry I bailed on you," she said, feeling slight guilt about it. Emerson knew she wasn't obligated to stay with them all night, but she didn't mean to ditch either. Erin waved her off. "Don't be sorry. It was entertaining watching whatever that was." Emerson laughed. Yeah. They drank out of their glasses, letting a comfortable silence take over for a little while. She eventually took a deep breath in before speaking up. "Is anything going on between you and Jay?" She questioned with a smirk on her lips. Erin was very obviously surprised by the question, and she pondered whether or not she should tell her. Her eyes went from Jay, who was sitting at the same table, to Emerson, one of her oldest friend. "We kissed a few weeks back." Emerson gasped lightly. "Really?" Erin nodded. "Nothing more can happen, though. We're partners, and there's Voight. You know how protective he is." And Emerson knew. She saw multiple times how Voight operated around young Erin, trying to protect her from anyone that could cause any harm to her, including herself. Erin was sensitive and easily roped into bad news. It was all she knew because of Bunny. "But Jay's not a threat to you, Erin. I'm sure Voight knows that," Emerson reasoned, trying to understand why her friend refused to admit her affection towards her partner. He seemed great, and Emerson was sure he could make Erin very happy. From the conversations she had with him, she knew she'd love having someone like him by her side. He does, but us being together could be a threat to the unit, and that is something he will never let happen. Erin finally told her the real reason, and Emerson could understand that. "If it's meant to be, I'm sure you'll find a way around it eventually," Emerson told her confidently, her eyes drifting towards Jay. If Erin trusted him enough to develop feelings towards him, then her old friend knew Jay was worth it. She just didn't know how much yet.